You don't announce it. You don't make a scene. You don't send a long message explaining everything you've been holding for months. You just become quieter, warmer even, softer around the edges, and somewhere inside you, a door you didn't know you had been building finally closes. The person on the other side often doesn't notice. Not right away. Sometimes not for weeks. Sometimes never. They might still text you. They might still think you're friends, but something in you has already left the room, and it left so gently that even you weren't sure of the exact moment it happened. This is the specific way INFJs say goodbye to people they are done with, not with fireworks, not with confrontation, with a kind of internal silence that finalizes everything before a single word is spoken out loud. And if you've done this more than once, maybe many times, I want you to understand what actually happened, because you probably called yourself cold for it, or avoidant, or bad at conflict. None of those are quite right. What you did was much more precise than that. Let's name the phenomenon first, because part of what makes this so disorienting is that you don't have a word for it. It isn't ghosting. Ghosting is sudden and often thoughtless. It isn't a breakup. There's rarely a formal announcement. It isn't estrangement. You might still be perfectly polite when you see them. What it is a quiet withdrawal, an inner exit that has already been decided long before your outer behavior catches up. Some people call this the INFJ door slam, but that name is misleading. It sounds violent, sudden, loud. In reality, for most INFJs, this door has been closing millimeter by millimeter for a very long time. What looks like a slam from the outside is really the last inch of a door that has been shutting for months or years. So why does it happen this way? Why the silence? Why the softness? Why the strange calm that settles over you once you've decided someone is no longer part of your inner world? To understand this, we have to talk about how you actually process people. The psychologist Carl Jung described introverted intuition, the dominant function in INFJs, as a slow, unconscious pattern recognition process. It doesn't work in single moments. It works over time. Every interaction with a person is quietly filed away, cross-referenced, compared against every other interaction. You are not consciously keeping score, but something inside you is watching, noticing, integrating, and at some point, often long after a healthier boundary would have been drawn, your intuition delivers a conclusion, not a feeling, not a suspicion, a conclusion. This person is not safe for me. This connection is not real. This relationship is costing me more than it gives. By the time that conclusion arrives, it feels less like a decision and more like a recognition, like you're finally seeing something you had already known for a long time. This is why the goodbye feels so quiet. There's nothing to argue about, nothing to negotiate. The processing already happened. It happened privately over months in the background of your mind, while you were still smiling at their messages and showing up for their birthday. And here is where the softness comes in, because most INFJs in the final phase before withdrawal actually become kinder, warmer, more patient. It's not performance. It's something more complicated than that. Part of it is Faye, your extroverted feeling function, trying to leave the emotional field as clean as possible. You don't want to hurt them on the way out. You don't want to leave residue. You want the ending to be gentle, even if the ending is final. So you soften, you smile more, you give a little extra warmth, almost as an unconscious apology for what you already know is coming. And part of it is grief, because you are grieving. You're grieving the version of this person you hoped they would be, the connection you thought this could become, the years you spent extending patience, giving them the benefit of the doubt, translating their behavior into more generous interpretations than they had earned. You're saying goodbye, not just to them, but to a version of the relationship you kept alive in your mind long after the real one had gone quiet. There's research that helps explain the internal cost of all of this. Roy Baumeister's work on ego depletion showed that self-regulation, the effort of managing your emotions, your reactions, your presentation, draws from a limited reservoir. Every time you soften your truth for someone, every time you translate your discomfort into politeness, every time you show up as the person they need instead of the person you are, that reservoir empties. INFJs often stay in relationships far past the point of depletion. You stay because you can see who someone could be. You stay because leaving feels dramatic and you don't want to be dramatic. You stay because the other person hasn't done anything technically wrong. They've just done 1,000 small things that added up to a feeling you couldn't ignore. And when the reservoir is finally empty, you don't explode. You just stop refilling the connection. The energy that used to flow outward to them simply stops flowing, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. This is what the quiet goodbye actually is. It's not punishment. It's not passive aggression. It's not avoidance. It's the sound of a nervous system that has finally, after a long time of overriding itself, stopped overriding. Now, I want to say something honest here. The quiet goodbye is not always fair to the other person. Sometimes they didn't know how much they had hurt you because you never told them. Sometimes they would have changed if they'd understood what was at stake. Sometimes your withdrawal feels sudden to them because your processing was invisible. This isn't to shame you. It's just to name it. You are allowed to leave. You are also allowed to be honest before you leave, when it's safe to do so. Both of those things can be true. But if you've already left someone this way, silently, softly, without explanation, I don't want you to carry that as evidence that something is wrong with you. Your system was doing exactly what it was built to do. It was protecting you from a connection that had, in some way, you could feel, but couldn't always articulate, become unsustainable. You are not cold. You are not avoidant. You are someone whose intuition takes a long time to reach a conclusion. And once it does, that conclusion is very hard to reverse. That's not a flaw. That's how deep processing works. The people who deserve your presence don't trigger this response. The people who deserve your presence make it easier for you to stay, not harder. And when you notice you're not withdrawing from someone, when you notice you feel more like yourself around them, not less, that's information too. That's your intuition speaking in the other direction. You don't need to say goodbye loudly for it to count. You don't need a final conversation for it to be real. Sometimes the most honest ending is the quietest one, the one that simply stops pretending. If any of this feels familiar, you're not alone. There are more of us here than you think. Deep minds, quietly closing doors, quietly opening new ones. If you'd like to keep reflecting alongside this channel, you're welcome to subscribe. No pressure, no urgency, just a quiet place to return to when you need it. A quiet place for deep minds